Welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. John F. Kennedy said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To check out whether it's suitable for you, please answer the following two questions. Question number one, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, question number one, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? And question number two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Your time is up. If you had difficulty answering either questions, this program is not for you. If you answer yes to either question or to both, this program is definitely not for you. But if your answers to both questions are absolutely not, this program is catered to you, and you should stick around. You will enjoy the discussion. It is informative, educational, enlightening, and quite interesting. We'll be right back. First, a note. The Fourth Branch program topics are all available on the People Branch YouTube channel. So for any topic of discussion that we have had in this program, you are able to retrieve those topics on the People Branch YouTube channel. The topic this afternoon is going to be a little bit short because we have prepared a very interesting program to discuss the route that we have taken from the time that Donald Trump became the 45th President of the United States, and to this important time when the nomination of a Supreme Court has been causing the most uproar since the Anita Hill confirmation hearing for Clarence Thomas. The interesting aspect of it is the fact that from the very onset, it was almost certain that Brett Kavanaugh will be placed on the Supreme Court without any problem. Little that the Republican knew something was to come to prevent this smooth ride from being achieved. Now we will show you, although it seems that the road to the Supreme Court was a straightforward path as far as the Republicans were concerned. Because number one, the Republicans are in the majority. And number two, the President of the United States is quote unquote Republican. And number three, the chairman, Chuck Grassley, of the Judiciary Committee was doing everything humanly possible to shield Brett Kavanaugh from any investigation, or real investigation, I should say, by the Democrat during the confirmation hearing, despite the very fact that Brett Kavanaugh proved to have not answered most of the question, or to have answered them either partially or not given any truthful answer at all. Because the Republicans are in the majority, Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, along with senior members such as Orrin Hatch and Lindsey Graham, they have done everything to shield Brett Kavanaugh. In a normal time, any nominee to the Supreme Court would be vetted not only from a character perspective, but to find exactly what could be hidden that nobody knows about. Ironically, even when a situation presents itself, such as the Christine Blasey Ford accusation that Brett Kavanaugh may have assaulted her when she was just 15 years old, the senior members in the Judiciary Committee, Orrin Hatch, and also the chairman, Chuck Grassley, came out very early on to dismiss the accusation. Needless to say, that was unprecedented because the very process during any nomination, any confirmation hearing, anything at all that comes out of ordinary would have triggered a stop to the process for an investigation. But instead, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee wanted to move the process forward regardless of the accusation. Orrin Hatch came out and said that that woman must be mixed up. And Chuck Grassley, who had set up a time for the voting for the confirmation hearing, mentioned on national TV that he will proceed with the vote. So it was unprecedented, and needless to say that the Democrats were fuming. So they went on major networks and tried to stop or slow down the process. Chuck Grassley wouldn't hear of it, but with enough pressure put into the process, one Republican, Jeff Flake, managed to at least slow down the process by asking for an investigation to be done, or else Republican would not get his vote. So Chuck Grassley gave in and an investigation was ensued. But needless to point out that the investigation was just a way to appease all parties, but not to prevent the outcome. With the FBI provided just 1 week to interview everybody who is involved in the process, it was all but certain nothing was going to be done. And at the end of the process, which only took FBI a couple of days, that also raised a red flag, because everybody suggested that 1 week would not be enough. And yet, within a couple of days, FBI declared that the investigation was completed. And by Wednesday, the White House received a report from the FBI about the investigation. In total, 9 people were interviewed, not including Brett Kavanaugh, not including Christine Blasey Ford. Those are the main parties to the investigation. So it is without saying that the investigation itself, as mentioned earlier, was just a way to appease the various parties and to have something to hold on to and to use as a way to move the process forward. And it seems, as of our talking, that Susan Collins, Jeff Flake, and Manchin have already stated that they will vote yes. In other words, Brett Kavanaugh will be placed on the Supreme Court. The only holdout is Murkowski, who also mentioned on national TV that she would vote no. But the issue is not so much about accusation by Christine Blasey Ford. Prior to that accusation, a number of people across the country, from Yale, where Brett Kavanaugh went to college, and professors across the nation did support Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court. But after the hearing, a number of those individuals have withdrawn their support for Brett Kavanaugh. More than 600 law professors across the nation have signed a petition asking the Republican Judiciary Committee not to vote yes on Brett Kavanaugh. And to top it all off, a retired Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, had for the first time in the history of the United States decide to add his voice to the list of individuals who say no to Brett Kavanaugh. It is unprecedented. The road to the Supreme Court is not without twist and turn. And it seems that the Republican Party, by hook, by crook, decides they will forge ahead. As already mentioned by Mitch McConnell, it doesn't matter the twist, the turn, the bump. He will make certain that Brett Kavanaugh sits on the Supreme Court. Now, is a word of caution. We know from experience that a number of events usually take place before a major event happen. Society has gone through that for a number of time. In fact, that's probably the reason today we do not have dinosaurs, because catastrophes have occurred and they have wiped out a whole species, many species sometimes. We humans have survived a lot of those catastrophes because we have the ability to think, to weather those type of major events that nature has poured upon us. But that is only possible for us to survive when we heed the advice of those who are in the know. For instance, when the weatherman, meteorology, comes with information and tell us that an earthquake is going to take place at such and such part of the nation in the world, we heed that advice and we leave the area. If there is going to be a hurricane, if there is going to be a tornado, if there is going to be a twister, whatever the case is, we survive because we heed the advice of those who have the knowledge to see before we even have a chance to experience the situation. But today, for reasons that are beyond understanding, the Republican Party, the chairman, the seniors in the Judiciary Committee do not heed the advice of more than 600 law professors across the nation who believe that Brett Kavanaugh is unfit for the Supreme Court. But on top of that, a retired Supreme Court justice believes that Brett Kavanaugh is not qualified to sit on the Supreme Court. The question is, why are the Republicans so eager to put Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, and why are they not heeding the advice of so many individuals who know what they're talking about? Tomorrow at 10:30 a.m., we will go through the path that has taken the situation from the time that Donald Trump raised his hand as the 45th president of the United States to today, as the country is battling this situation of putting Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court in spite of the advice of many individuals, in spite of the advice of those who understand the importance of such role. On the hearing of last Thursday, Brett Kavanaugh showed his true character. He showed, number one, that he is a very partisan-driven individual. He is untrustworthy because he doesn't speak the truth. And on top of that, he is a very vindictive individual. So why would the country put such an individual on the Supreme Court? What is actually going on? Now, the person that Brett Kavanaugh will replace, as it seems to be all but certain that Brett Kavanaugh will be placed on the Supreme Court. Kennedy, the gentleman with the retired sign in front of him, is the individual that's being taken out of the picture, and Brett Kavanaugh will take his place. However, as mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of pushback by a lot of people across the country, including Brett Kavanaugh's college classmate, including law professors across the nation, including a bunch of individuals that see Brett Kavanaugh as unfit to sit as a judge on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has the last word in the country. Those 9 individuals, they are very powerful individuals. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, it should scare you that Brett Kavanaugh is someone who practices politics. It is a no-no for any judge on the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh himself said it 2 years ago that the two most important qualifications for a judge is, number one, to be of good temper, of good demeanor. Number two, to be impartial. A judge cannot show partiality, not to be involved in politics. And on top of that, a judge cannot be seeking revenge. On Thursday, last Thursday, we saw Brett Kavanaugh expressing those or showing those characteristics. In other words, Brett Kavanaugh disqualifies himself as being someone to be put on the Supreme Court. No, we are not talking about credentials. We are not talking about qualification in terms of experience, because Brett Kavanaugh does have those qualifications. He's been a judge on the Court of Appeal in the District of Columbia for almost 12 years now. And he has other credentials to add to the list of his credentials. Other experience, rather, to add to the list of credentials. So there is no question whatsoever when it comes to Brett Kavanaugh's credential. But what is at stake is to place on the Supreme Court an individual with very low character, untrustworthy, and vindictive. The Supreme Court is the last branch of the government which still has some sort of integrity. And we know that Clarence Thomas was put on the Supreme Court with a cloud over his head. He was accused of sexually harassing an individual. But today, for reasons that are beyond understanding, Brett Kavanaugh, another Republican, accused of having sexually assaulted an individual, now the Republicans are pushing every possible rock, every possible turn. They want to put another individual on the Supreme Court that's been accused of sexually assaulting another individual. It is a very dark moment for the country, because the Supreme Court, the last place for some integrity, is being tainted once again by the Republican. So join me tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. when we go through the path of President Trump becoming the 45th president of the United States to today, and to why in the world that the Republicans want to put Brett Kavanaugh at all costs on the Supreme Court. It is a road worth finding out why we are, as a country, traveling this road, and why you, Democrat or Republican, should call your representative and said, we do not want Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. But tomorrow, we will show you why such a push, why Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Chuck Grassley, Lindsey Graham, Orrin Hatch, they all want, no matter what, to place Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. This is not an exercise of partisanship. This is not just an exercise of Democrat versus Republican. This exercise that's currently going on in the country, that's going to plague the country for decades to come, it is much deeper than just Democrat versus Republican. It is much deeper than just putting another quote-unquote conservative on the Supreme Court. It is a fight. It is not over. And it is necessary for you to get involved, because failure to do so, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids will suffer the consequences of placing on the Supreme Court another individual accused of sexual assault, another individual who has no integrity, another individual who is untrustworthy. The integrity of the Supreme Court is at stake. And that should be your concern, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican. I'll be right back. Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question?
Wayfair, let me show you how I do my thing. Check. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair it all. Here we go now. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that.
Don't just shop for your home. Wayfair your home. Find everything you need and more at wayfair.com today.
Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the country. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our business, our only business, is to be objective. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent, it is necessary, it is critical. Our very freedom depends on it.
Mom, Dad, hi. I had a very minor fender bender tonight in an unreasonably narrow fast food drive-thru lane. But what a powerful life lesson. And don't worry, I have everything handled. I already spoke to our Allstate agent, and I know that we have accident forgiveness, which is so smart on your guys' part. Like the fact that they'll just forgive you.
4 weeks without the car.
Okay, yep, good night.
With accident forgiveness, your rates won't go up just because of an accident. Switching to Allstate.
We mentioned earlier that we know that the investigation was just for the sake of appeasing all parties. We know that because there are a number of events that took place prior that tells us that Republicans had no intention of conducting an investigation, which they push against really very, very hard. If you watch the hearing during which Christine was providing details of her assault by Brett Kavanaugh, you would notice that Chuck Grassley at every turn push back the idea of having an FBI investigation. And of course, the very fact that initially the dates that were set for a vote were never changed. And even with the hearing scheduled for last Thursday, Mr. Grassley had already set Friday for the vote. In other words, it would not have mattered whatever was being said. Chuck Grassley was going to move forward with the vote. And on top of that, if you remember very clearly, even when the FBI decided, when the White House decided to go ahead with Jeff Flake's suggestion to have an FBI investigation behind the scene, there were a lot of negotiation that wanted to warrant the fact that the FBI investigation would not turn anything. But don't take my words for it, because I am going to show you exactly something that was happening at the time that prior to the hearing. Now, there was a hearing coming. Christine Blasey Ford, who had accused Brett Kavanaugh of having sexually assaulted her, a hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Now, before that hearing, Mitch McConnell, in front of an audience, which means we don't know yet what Christine Blasey Ford was going to present to the nation as far as the accusation. Neither did Mitch McConnell. However, he was confident enough that he stood in front of an audience and said to that audience not to worry about all the noise that you're hearing, and all those are bumps on the road, but he assured them that Brett Kavanaugh will sit on the Supreme Court. Now think about that for one moment and decide as to how in the world could Mitch McConnell assure his audience that Brett Kavanaugh will sit on the Supreme Court before the hearing? The answer is really very simple. The hearing was just for show. The investigation was just for show. Everything that they already said would have gone forward regardless of the accusation. Now, don't take my word for it. Listen to Mitch McConnell talking to the audience and watch what happened after he assured them of the outcome of the confirmation for Brett Kavanaugh.
And you're all following the current Supreme Court fight. And you will watch it unfold in the course of the next week. President Trump has nominated a stunningly successful individual. You've watched the fight. You've watched the tactics. But here's what I want to tell you. In the very near future, Judge Kavanaugh will be on the United States Supreme Court.
Mitch McConnell received a standing ovation, saying without flinching, without blinking, that in the very near future, Brett Kavanaugh will sit on the Supreme Court. This is not the words of someone who was trying to figure out how to say that. He was very confident that is going to happen. So all this hearing about Christine Blasey accusation, the second accusation accuser, Deborah Ramirez, and all this FBI investigation to look into the matter, all that was for show. I already mentioned that. Now, I invite you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. to be here with me on the 4th branch, in which during time I will show you the road that has been taken in order to get to this point, and why Brett Kavanaugh confirmation was already ensured before Brett Kavanaugh was even picked for nomination. That may sound a little bit crazy, but tomorrow at 10:30 a.m., be there and we will show you the detail of how it was already predisposed by Trump to make certain that Brett Kavanaugh is put on the Supreme Court. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be for you. Hopefully, I'll see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Good night. The 4th Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the 4th Branch, live from New York. Good day.